I'm Lloyd Holiday, and this is the Cost of a Thing podcast. Thanks for listening in today. The cost of a thing is the amount of time that you must spend working to buy the things that you want and need. And that directly determines your standard of living. This is podcast number 5, and I am counting down my top 10 super ripoffs that are negatively affecting our standard of living the most here in the United States. And the number 3 super ripoff on that top 10 list is the college ripoff. Yes, the college ripoff is a big one. And I can tell all you students out there who are going to school right now in college, you are definitely being ripped off right now. There's no doubt about that. Now I want to touch on some of the common characteristics that most, if not all, ripoffs have in common. And first, and I've talked about this one before in previous podcasts, is that somebody somewhere out there is getting a lot of money for doing very little work or even no work for at least a large portion of the money that they're taking in. Another characteristic that these ripoffs have in common is that it's something we need. We've got to have it to live in the modern world. And they know that, and so that they go ahead and they jack up that price because they know you need this thing, and they're going to exploit that need. And another common characteristic is that the law of supply and demand for this thing has completely broken down. The normal free market supply has been somehow disrupted or corrupted, and the normal demand has been exaggerated or amplified in some way, usually by the government, but it can be other entities. And not only has the supply and demand, the law of supply and demand been corrupted here in these cases, the normal competition that keeps prices in line has somehow been corrupted also. Competition in business is what keeps the prices reasonable. That way, one side, it's why restaurants are pretty reasonably priced, because there's so much competition in that area. And it's not here. It's not in the college industry. It's not in the college industry. Competition is not part of the college industry. Price competition. There is none. They pretty much, they all set their prices the same, and you just have to pay it, and there is no competition there. And that's another characteristic of ripoffs that usually is present in ripoffs. And another characteristic of ripoffs that they just put on the air of like, this is the way it is, and there's nothing that can be done about it. It's just the way it is. You're going to have to accept it. Get used to it. The prices are just high, and you're just going to have to live with that. That's the mentality. There's nothing. Why discuss it? Why it's expensive? And how to lower the price? It's just expensive. Just live with it, and grow up and pay the price. That's another one of the characteristics. And of course, the college ripoff fits that description. And also, anybody that's watched the prices of college and how they've escalated over the years knows that they are in an extreme ripoff situation right now. The prices have gone through the roof at both state schools and universities, and private universities especially are off the charts. I don't even know how people can afford to go to those private universities at all. So let's define this college ripoff, and to do that, what I do is I set a frame of reference, and as I did for the housing ripoff and the medical ripoff, I used the 1960s as a frame of reference when prices were much more in line with reality and the normal inflation rate. And looking around online, it doesn't take long. Anybody can look these numbers up. And of course, these are approximate, and I'm just relying on online sources. But we know college costs have skyrocketed, so these are very good numbers as far as I'm concerned. Okay, so this chart shows that between 1970 and 2010, the general inflation rate, the CPI inflation rate, Consumer Price Index, went up 400% between 70 and 2010. Well, during that same period, college tuition went up 1,800%. So there it is. There's the ripoff. You can see it very clearly there. And after 2010, I can guarantee you it kept going at a super clip, much higher than the general inflation rate. I've seen other charts that show that too. So that means during that period, the inflation of college tuition was 4 to 5 times as great as the general inflation in that period. That's the super ripoff. There it is. So we can see very clearly that the students who graduate in 2019, this summer, will be getting the same old bachelor's degrees or master's degrees, and they take about the same number of semester hours or units to get the degree. They have to accumulate a certain number of units, and usually about 125 or 30 units, semester units. And they're getting that same old degree, same number of units. It takes about the same amount of time to get it, about 4 years. And yet they're paying many multiples of what the student in the 1960s and 70s paid to get that degree. And that's the same old story that we're hearing on just about all these ripoffs. You used to get this product for this certain price, same product, and now you're paying many times more to get the same product that you got in the old days, not that long ago. Okay, now I'm going to go into some of the reasons for this college ripoff and the super high prices for tuition that the students are having to pay today versus what they had to pay in the past. And I'm not going to go into great detail. This is just an overview today. I'm going to do many more podcasts and go into much more detail and on other issues. Today I'm just going to hit the high points, the big reasons that I think this is happening. And one of the reasons is that the states have decided not to pay as much of the percentage of the college costs as they used to. They've pulled back, and I don't have the exact numbers, but I've read that they've pulled back quite a bit, and they're putting more of the burden on the students. And that may be because of the availability of lots of student loans and grants and those kind of things, but from the federal government, but the state governments have pulled back and they're not paying as much. And I'm going to get into the numbers of that in future videos, but that's one of the reasons I think the costs have gone up. And another big reason is the easy availability of student loans to pay for college. When the universities see that it's so easy to get loans from the federal government or banks or whoever people are borrowing from, they just go ahead and raise the prices up because they know they can just get a little bit bigger loan and pay for that. There's nothing to stop them from raising the prices when the students can get these easy money government loans. And that leads us to another big reason. There is a lot more demand for college than there used to be. A lot more students are going. In the 1960s, our frame of reference, only about 10% of people had college degrees back then. And now, what I just looked up the other day, 35% of all the people have a college diploma now, I guess a 4-year degree at least. And that's a big increase, going from 10% 50 years ago, and now over a third of the people have a college degree now. And I'm going to talk about that more, but that increases the demand, and also that allows them to raise the price up higher. So those are some of the big reasons for these huge price increases. And it's certainly not all the reasons. There's a lot more reasons, and I'm going to be looking into this further. But these are some of the big ones. And like I said, I'm going to look more into this and get into a lot more detail in future podcasts on the big student loan and college ripoff. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about student loans and the student loan crisis, really. With this new easy availability of money and the universities raising the fees so high, the tuition and the rest of it, huge student loans. People are getting these huge student loans, and it totals up now to $1.5 trillion is owed on student loans. And I think that's more than is owed on cars and many and credit card. I'd have to get those numbers, but it's one of the biggest amount of money owed of anything right now. Some of the professional degrees or the students are racking up several $100,000, $300,000, $400,000 in loans before they can get this certificate or whatever they are going for. And all of this debt, when the student, if he does graduate, now many of them rack up a lot of debt and they never even graduate. They've got tens of thousands of dollars in loan and they don't graduate. Somehow they don't make it through school, but they made a couple of years maybe, and then they just dropped out. And of course, these debts cannot be written off in bankruptcy. The student loan debts carry with these people for life, and they're a very big burden on them as they go through their lives and trying to start a family. You got this big student loan debt. Maybe both parents have a big student loan debt, and so it's hard to buy a house. It's hard to raise children. It's hard to get started in life, even harder. And of course, you think you're going to get a better job, and many people do. There are certain degrees are better than others, of course, to get a job, but many of the degrees are not demanded in the job market, and people wind up, working at the grocery store or at Walmart or bartending or waitressing, and so they never get a good enough job to really pay back those loans quickly or even pay them back at all. So these big student debts have a very negative impact generally on a lot of people's lives who are carrying them. And some of the payback periods on these loans can be 20 years, 25 years. Some of these people will carry these debts nearly all of their working lives, and they may be ready for retirement by the time they pay these off. And I've even seen where there's a lot of retired people that still have student loan debt. So it's quite something. And the government, of course, is encouraging people to go to college. They encourage everybody to go. They want everybody to go to college. Well, not everybody needs to go to college, especially if they don't want to go. A lot of people feel compelled to go. And a lot of young people, I think, go to college just because there are no alternatives. There's no decent jobs. Like in the 60s and 70s, they used to have the factory jobs making cars and stuff like that. They'd get into those kind of jobs, and they could make really good money and had good benefits, and they could raise a family. You get right in there out of high school. But now a lot of those jobs aren't there. There are still some, but there's not as many and as many opportunities. So a lot of kids go, well, I'll go to school. They all tell me that's the thing I should be doing. And, college does help you in many ways. It does. But if you rack up a lot of debt and you get the wrong kind of degree that's not desirable in the job market, and then you can't pay back the loans and you can't get a great job to start your life, well, then the whole thing, just the rug is just pulled right out from under you as a young person. And a lot of people are in that position. They end up living back at home with their parents and working a job that is not in their field. And they're not making enough money to pay back the loans and to get started in life. And this is the problem here. So you can see it's kind of like a circle. You keep they're chasing their tails around almost in many of these instances. Now, I guess we've all heard the story of the guy that went and got the degree in marketing, and maybe he's got a master's degree even, and he's working as a bartender. I've been up at the bar, and a couple of guys were telling me that. Yeah, I've got a master's degree in marketing, and he's the bartender. And I'm thinking, well, that's kind of, why aren't you out marketing? We're not using his talent. We're not using his skills. It's wasted. So what it seems like to me is, with the government encouraging everyone to go to school and the easy money that's out there to get those student loans to go to school, is that we now have too many degrees and not enough jobs that require a degree. And you can see that up on the screen there. As of 2018, 35% of Americans had a bachelor's degree or higher. And the BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, estimates that only 23% of jobs require a bachelor's degree or higher. So again, the law of supply and demand comes into play here, and you have a large supply of bachelor's degrees and a smaller demand for bachelor's degrees on the job. And so that tends to drive wages down, even if you do find a job that requires a bachelor's degree. And here's an interesting related point. In the 1960s, the standard of living for most Americans was better than it is today, and here in 2019. And in the 1960s, only about 10% of the population had a bachelor's degree or higher, versus today, about 35% of the population has a bachelor's degree or higher. So more than 3 times as many educated people with bachelor's degree or higher today than there was in the 1960s, and yet we're not living as good of a standard of living as they did then. Well, is that telling us that all this education is not really helping us that much? I thought one of the main ideas of having more educated people would be to live better in general. But I guess may not be the case. So, and I'm gonna look into this a lot more in the future. I just thought I'd bring up that point real quickly here, and I'm gonna do some more podcasts and explore this a lot more. And sometimes I notice that because there's a lack of good jobs for people out of high school in the trades and so forth, and they encourage these kids to go to school, to college, and they take out the loans not just to pay the tuition, but to support themselves for the 4 or 5 years or 6 years, whatever it takes to get their degree. And so they rack up these huge loans. Maybe it's $20,000 a year or so. And okay, at the end of the 4 years, they owe $80,000, and and this can happen very quickly before the 3 or 4 years goes by so fast. A lot of times, especially when they're studying in school, they don't even recognize what's happening, and by the time they figure it out, they've got $75,000, $80,000 in student loans, and a degree maybe that's not so great. Maybe I'm not going to go into the type of degrees that may not be desirable in the job market, but they're there. And of course, I always try to look at who's getting rich off these students, off the college ripoff. And of course, you see the Taj Mahal universities that look like the Taj Mahal. They're fancy. There's a lot of money flowing into these places. And then you've got the books, the bookmakers, they get a lot of money. I don't know, one book's probably can be $100 to $150 for a class now. And then the people that make the loans, they get a profit off the interest. And of course, the professors, some of those are making huge amounts of money. Not all of them. Some of them aren't making that great of money. And then you have the landlords that set up their apartment complexes around the university, and they see the big demand for housing, and they jack up the prices too, and they know they can get more student loans to pay those rents. So all of these people are cashing in on this, and of course there's more, but those are I think the big ones, at least the ones I've thought of. Well, also there are some more people that are probably getting a lot of money, and that's the college administrators, the presidents, the vice presidents, they've got huge administration offices, and they're just loaded with very high paid people. Some of these college presidents and like positions are some of the highest paid positions in the country, maybe even as high as some of the CEOs get paid of corporations. And then there's the whole testing apparatus, the SAT testing apparatus that determines who's going to get into the colleges, and there's various tests for medical school, and there's tests for law school, and it's just this huge testing apparatus. And who knows if those tests are that good or not. I don't know. I doubt it. Okay, so that's another super ripoff, the college super ripoff. It's got all the classic characteristics of the super ripoff. The escalating costs, many times that of normal inflation rate. It's got people getting very rich off of it. It's got the government in there, funneling money into it, loaning money into it, and that is driving that cost right up. And what I find so insidious about some of these ripoffs is they affect the young people who are very vulnerable coming into their life, starting their life, and it affects them, it affects the younger generations, the Generation X group, the Millennial Generation, and the younger generations coming after them. And so I'm going to wrap this up today, podcast 5, and I will be doing more detailed podcasts on the college ripoff and all of the other ripoffs as I go on here over the coming months. Thank you for listening in today, and until next time, this is Lloyd Holiday signing off.